Hi everyone on Instagram. We are here again to talk all about trauma with my friend and colleague René and my friend and today colleague as well, JayMan. Um,
Hi.
so we are going to wait a little minute before we are live on YouTube and then just
All of
talk
them are live
about.
actually.
We
Fantastic.
are live right now.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Today it's all happening very quickly. So welcome everybody. Um, Very glad to be here with you, Jay. You have an incredible story to share. I've been touched over and over and over again over the many years that I've known you. And today I know you have a chance to share with us some of the most profound moments of your life, which is such a privilege for all of us. And I want to thank you in advance, and I'm sure I'll be just as grateful after the event. Thank you, René, for being here, for sharing this moment with us and accompanying us as well. And so, without further ado, Jay, I'm going to leave the word to you to listen to your beautiful story. Thank you.
Excellent. So, hi everyone. Greetings from Quebec in Canada. I hope you're enjoying like the weather. We have good weather today in Quebec. It's very nice. I'm glad to be here today to share my story. That is not going to be as nice and great as the weather we having right now, because we're talking about trauma, and it's usually not something really nice or interesting. Well, it's interesting to hear about it, but it's not nice like nice weather. It's not all warm and fuzzy and everything. Yeah. So I'm 40 years old now and feeling really good about life, but it hasn't always been the case. So I grew up I'm a single child with a single mom, and we spent like the first years of my life doing the best we could. And when I was about 8 years old, my mom met this guy. His name was John, and he was a guy from the USA, super nice. And my mom fell in love with him really fast. They got married, and at the same time, my mom got a very well paid job in a big company, so she was making a lot of money suddenly, and she decided to move and buy a farm in the countryside of Quebec. And we moved there, and for a while we had a nice like family or something. Everyone was happy until I realized that John was actually a violent alcoholic who was using a lot of drugs. And I say found that because, first of all, he would never be violent towards me when my mom was there. So uh, when she was around, he was acting kind of nice. I mean, it was obvious that he had a drinking problem, but all the violence and everything, that wasn't that obvious. So uh, the thing is, my mom was working on different work shifts. So she would work during the day, she would work during the evenings, and sometimes she would work at night. And when she would work during the day, that be pretty much the best days for me because I would go to school, then come back, maybe go play with my friends after school, and then come back home. My mom is there and I'm safe. Everything's fine. But when she was working in the evening, or worse, when she was working at night, that meant I was stuck for the evening or the night with John, who was violent. And when I say stuck in the house, I really was stuck because we were at the end of a countryside road. There's no asphalt there. Even today, like there's still no asphalt like on this road. It is so far away from everything, and we were like the last house in it. So when he was violent with me, when he would beat me, the thing you hear psychopaths say in movies and TV shows, and they're dragging their victims, and they're like, "Oh, you can scream all you want, no one's gonna hear you." Well, I know exactly how it feels because I screamed and I screamed a lot, and no one ever heard anything about it because we were too far away. Uh, so I'm not gonna give many details about what John has done to me because mostly because I don't remember much of the 2 years that he was in our life. Um, and this is something that's something I had to work hard to accept that you know there's there are a lot of things that happened to me that I will never remember. Now I accept that because I thought for a while that with therapy and dealing with my things, stuff would just come back, like the memories were repressed, but I think they were just deleted. I think what I've been through was so horrible that my brain was just like, I'm just gonna erase that, like nothing happened, and it's terrible. Well, it's a nice thing. I mean, it's a survival thing on one side, but it's a very terrible thing because many years later, uh, I started to have what we call emotional flashbacks. So when you have like PTSD, when you've been through trauma, sometimes like you're gonna have flashbacks, and I have those. I have had those flashbacks with the memory, the image, like reliving this thing out of nowhere. And I'm going to tell you about one of those flashbacks in a moment. Uh, but the worst were emotional flashbacks where I would just be overwhelmed with an emotion and have no idea what it relates to. Um, what happened for me to have this emotion, and it was really terrible because it's hard in those moments to stay in that emotion and deal with it because I have to deal with that emotion because that's the healing process, but at the same time I have to be aware that the emotion isn't linked to anything happening in my life right now. It's just like a ghost emotion that comes out from nowhere from the back of my mind, linked to something, and there's nothing to link it to, and like the brain wants to link it to the person in front of me or the thing going on in my life, but I had to work hard to stay away from that. So that was kind of horrible. Now I'm going to tell you one flashback I had when and that will, I think it shows the extent of the horrors I've been through with John. And I, I was about 9.5 years old. So John has been in our lives almost 2 years now. And it was just before he would be kicked out in the most interesting fashion. So I had this dog, this ugly black dog, and I liked him so much, even though he was like very not a cute dog or nothing. He was my dog, and I liked him a lot. And one night, I opened the door to let him go out to make like they take a piss and everything before we go to bed. And I just stay out on the balcony, and he runs away and he goes straight into the forest. And he just runs in the forest at night, like dark of the night. And I freaked out because like you have coyotes in these parts of the country. Like you have lots of wild animals who would eat my dog. So I just ran after my dog in the forest and got lost because it was the dark of the night. There was no moonshine, nothing, like no moonlight there. It was dark. And I yelled when I realized I was lost. I freaked out and I yelled and I yelled and I yelled. I was hoping like that John in the house would hear me, but he was too far away and there was nothing I could do. And I just exhausted myself screaming and screaming and screaming. And at one point, I just came in this stage of absolute despair where I was like, oh, I'm gonna die here. Like my life is over. I'm gonna be eaten by coyotes or something. And then I felt something like rub on my leg. So I freak out and I realize it's my dog. He came back. He found me back. And I take my dog and I'm cold and I'm scared. I'm shivering with my dog in my arms. And then I don't know, some moonlight appears and I see the trail where I had to go back to the house, and I walk out of it and I'm so relieved. I'm like, oh, finally I can go back home. Like I'm not gonna die here. And it hit me at that moment. I saw the house and it really hit me that I've been out of the house for quite a while now. And I could see John just pacing inside the house. And I thought, oh God, I'm going to go back in and he's going to beat the crap out of me. And he's probably going to kill me. Like there's a chance he kills me tonight. And as a kid, as a 9.5-year-old kid, I had to make a choice to either go back in the house, which is supposed to be a safe haven for me, like a safe space, like a place where I can just, chill out and not fear for my life and my safety, with a man who's supposed to look after me. Well, now this place is a threat and this man is a threat, and I have to either go in there and face his wrath and his violence, or stay in the woods and die there. And I really, really, really contemplated like the possibility to stay in the woods and just die there, because that was a certainty. Like I was sure that it would happen in the woods. I didn't know what would be happening in the house. And obviously, in the end, I went back in the house, and I have absolutely no memory what happened after that. But that like is the extent of what happened to me. And eventually, my mom kicked him out of the house. And she asked for a divorce and everything. That didn't go well. That didn't go well at all. She hid me uh, into with some of her friends that I really liked a lot, and she hid me there because she knew it would go bad. And he was an American, so he had guns in the house. So he threatened to kill my mom. Then he threatened to kill himself. So she got out of the house. She called the cops, and the cops came in, and he shot at the cops. And so they had to call in like the SWAT or something, like the equivalent of the SWAT we have here in Quebec. And they went there, and they used tear gas to get him out of the house. And then he went in prison. He went in court, and in court, the judge said, "Oh well, what you did, like that's like we cannot accept that here, so we're gonna send you back to the U.S. But meanwhile, because it's gonna take a while for all the administration to happen, while you're waiting to go back to the U.S., well, I'm sending you back home." And the judge was sending this man back in our house. And keep in mind, my mom hid me. Like you imagine, you have a mom who hid her kid because she was afraid for his safety. The guy threatened to shoot my mom in the face. Then he threatened to shoot himself in front of her. He shot at the cops, and I refused to come in court to testify because I was too scared to face him and say what he did to me and everything. And the judge was sending him back home. And what saved me and my mom, because it would have been a bloodbath, or we would have just like ran away and went to another country and started over for our own safety. What saved us is that when the judge said, "Oh, do you have something to add? Serve your sentence." John just gave the judge a finger. Like he flipped him the finger, and the judge was like, "Oh, well, Like that is unacceptable. You're going to jail now. So this still baffles me, like the stupidity of that judge in the system. But like the good thing is now John is out of the picture, right? He's gone. Everything is good. Like we get our lives back. Well, absolutely not, because uh, the damage just keeps building up for years and years. And I've been left to myself. I had pretty much no professional help after that. No one in our magnificent justice system here in Quebec thought, hey, maybe this kid needs some help. Maybe he's been through some things, you know. So, and my mom couldn't help me either because she went into a deep depression and she had a hard time just taking care of her own self. So I was 10 years old and I had to pretty much an adult, you know, and take care of myself and physically and care to my own needs and learn to deal with what I've been through, like all the horrors, all the memories, like all the scars. And the only way I found that was efficient at the time was drugs and alcohol. So I started drinking. I was like 9 years and a half, 10 years old. Started smoking cigarettes. I was 11. Started smoking weed. I was like 13, around that, like 12, 13 years old. And that was the only way I had to feel good because I didn't know how to deal with all the hurt that was going on inside me. So the only way I could feel good it was to take a beer, smoke a cigarette, smoke a joint, anything, um, and that would just numb the pain, and I was able to keep on going. And I've been doing that for like a long time, a very long time, just trying to get by with drugs and alcohol until I got to the point where that wasn't working anymore. Like that, because the thing is that the pain was still there. It was just growing up, like with me, and just getting bigger. And at one point, I was like, okay, like the amount of alcohol and drugs I need to keep this pain at bay is just it's just gonna kill me, you know. So and because of the drug, because of the alcohol, because of all the pain and anger I had inside me, I was turning into a human I didn't want to turn into. I was getting violent. Uh, and it came slowly, but you know, I was absolutely becoming violent with people around me. Like at first verbally, then psychologically, and I had my dog at that time, and I'm really, really sad to say that I was violent with my dog, like physically violent. I was physically like he was my emotional punching bag, you know. And so, and I realized I was becoming John, you know. I was becoming a hurt kid who didn't know how to deal with the hurt, got into drugs and alcohol, and was now making other people pay for my inability to deal with my problems. So uh, I made a big decision to man up and take my responsibilities and say, okay, now I'm going to uh, accept that I am not responsible for anything that has happened to me. Like anything that John did to me, I have no responsibility in that. He's the one responsible. Um, I was 8. I couldn't defend myself in any ways. Anyways, and I could not run away because there's no running away. Like when you're 8, like where am I gonna go? Like so I'm not responsible for anything that has happened to me, but I am responsible for deciding day after day that I'm not going to deal with that, that I'm not going to deal with the hurt, that I'm still going to be drinking and numbing the pain with drugs and alcohol. This is my responsibility. And the moment I figured that out, I said, okay, well, it's also my responsibility to stop drinking, to get my life back together. So first thing, I quit drinking, and I was really motivated. And after a week, at that time, I had quit smoking weed and cigarette, and I was just like drinking. And I quit for different reasons, the other ones, and I stopped drinking. And after a week, I was back smoking weed because I couldn't handle like the pain and the hurt that was coming back. And uh, I, with weed, what was interesting is that all the memories that were I was keeping repressed in my mind with alcohol, they came back, and all the hurt and the emotions, they came back, and that's where I started having flashbacks. um, and weed was making me really numb, like emotionally numb when I was high. And so the pain and the memories will come back, the hurt will come back, but it was not as scary and as hurtful as it would have been if I was sober because I was high. So it allowed me to, it was like a sedative that you give to someone before going into like um, an operation or something, uh, like and that allowed me to get out a lot of stuff. And then I decided to quit smoking weed, and I found myself lying in bed like pretty much all day long, just crying and crying and crying for many days. And I was like, okay, that is not something I can deal with right now. Like that's not normal. What is going on? I need help. So I went to get some help, and I found some really good help in Quebec. A nice place called Autonomy, which is a place where they specialize in helping men. They really specialize in helping men who deal with some kind of challenges and difficulties in their lives. They helped me a lot. Um, because it was during the pandemic, I had access to free therapy, like one-on-one therapy. And I took advantage of that because I was really motivated. Like I wanted to get that stuff out, and it worked. It works so well. And it wasn't the first time I went in therapy, but it was the first time I was in therapy, and I wanted to heal. I wanted to figure out what was going on and tell my story. And since 2020, I haven't been drinking or doing drugs. Or I took drugs like twice, maybe three times since 2020, but I didn't enjoy it anymore. Like I'm with some friends and we're having a good time. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take maybe just a puff on the joint, and I feel really bad after that, and I don't want to go back to it. Like, I didn't fall back, and I didn't touch alcohol. Alcohol, I'm not touching anymore because I know I can easily fall back to it. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of my story. And yeah, a nice story of what I talk about trauma and PTSD, and there's this thing that I found out because I looked into PTSD to try to understand what was going on with me at one point in my life. And I was like, it feels like I should like recognize myself in PTSD, but I don't recognize myself in PTSD. And then I heard about complex PTSD. So the CPTSD that uh, is a state that you develop when you're stuck for a long time in a traumatic situation. So like PTSDs will develop if you have like a big trauma on a short span of time. But if you're stuck in a traumatic experience for many and many months and years, anything, then it becomes really a complex PTSD. And when I found that and I started looking into CPTSD, I was like, oh, okay, this is me. This is absolutely me. I see myself in everything about that. So that helped me a lot to understand, like, and just put words on what I was feeling and be like, oh, okay, that's I'm normal, you know. With all I've been through, oh, it's normal that I don't seek like uh, relations with other people because I don't trust people anymore, and I have abandonment issues, and I have these issues, and I saw all the buffet of issues I had to deal with, and I just took one at a time and just tried to unfold the knot, and it worked out in the end.
That's a lot, JayMan. Thank you for sharing your story. And one thing I would just want to pick up, and Nicholas, if you will allow me, is that how you were able to first, as a 9 year old, not even 10, first connect with the dog. I really liked how you shared your compassion with the dog, and the moment in the forest when you were able to retrieve him and hold him, it's like the moon just gave you a compass that
Yeah.
moment is you're directed back home, you know. And I just really very curious of how that came about. How long did you stay with the dog as far as connection, your connection with the dog, and growing up and getting into all these habits that you got into, becoming Johnny, but still, do you feel a part of you really, when you're with that dog, the black dog that many other people didn't like, but you loved him so dearly, the moment with him created clarity and gave a pathway, literally?
Yeah. Well, I could talk for hours about that dog. That was a dog. Uh, about, being a 9.5-year-old kid going in the woods to get my dog. That's something I figured out that, you know, all the thing that John took away from me, like my childhood and my innocence and my happiness. I was a very, very happy kid. Like, I'm talking to everybody randomly, and then suddenly I just shut down like a clam, just like, and no one's touching me. So he took that and a lot away from me. But there's one thing he's never gonna take from me. I was 9.5 and I risked my life to save my dog because I cared for
Mm.
him. And that's something not a lot of people will do. And I'm like, that's something no one's taking away from me. Um, but my dog, a thing is that and from what I've heard, a lot of people who has been through trauma, they will get a strong bond with animals, with pets, because pets, they give you a very, very, very unconditional love. They love you. You exist, and they love you for that. You feed them, you pet them. They're gonna love you for that. Like, I have a cat in the apartment. It's not my cat. It's my roommate's cat, but he loves me because I pet him. And I'm just there, and he comes and he's like, "Hey, hi, how you doing?" And he sleeps with me when my roommate's not there, and so the connection is just very easy, and it's really satisfying because I grew up in a really, really chaotic environment. I grew up in a situation where love was really conditional, and it was really hard to get because I never knew which conditions I had to fulfill that day to get the attention and the love. Like, the image I like to give is that, to understand how it is, like, because it's hard for people who didn't go through to understand how does it feel to come back to a house where you get beaten every day. And just imagine that you're like 8 years old and you come back to your house, and every time you get inside the house, you know, in the house there's a bomb, and when you get in the house there's a keypad, and you have to put in a secret password to disarm the bomb. But the password changes all the time, and no one's telling you what the new password is. And you have only one shot at disarming the bomb, because if you miss, the bomb is going to explode, and oh, you're going to get like hurt a lot by the explosion. So that's basically it. There's nothing. There's no stability. There's no like there's no way for me to anticipate and learn a behavior that's going to allow me to maneuver around like the violent person in my life. And if there had been a pattern, I would have learned a pattern. But there was no pattern, and that's the most violent thing, is that there's no pattern, and it becomes so unstable and chaotic. And when I had my dog, though, I could just pick up my dog and hug him, and he would be happy, and he would lick me, and we would go outside, and we would play, and we would just have fun, and it was just so easy. And it's not even just with John, because after that, I had a lot of problems too. Like interpersonal problems, because somewhere in my mind I came to believe the idea that, you know, the people that were supposed to be there to help me and protect me and help me grow, they what's the word? Betrayed me. Like they betrayed my trust and my natural trust towards those people who were supposed to be there. People I was really dependent on to feed me, protect me, like clothe me, and so they failed me, they betrayed me. And then I'm like, if those people that are so central to my life were not there for me, well, no one's going to be there for me, like, because they were so, like, why would a random stranger would be there for me when the people who were supposed to care for me weren't? So it was really hard for me to get into real intimate relations. Like, I was good to speak with people if I wanted to, and it's easy. I look good, and you know, I developed like a good mask, like a good smiling mask, and I was able to go around and, you know, meet people. But it was never like it was always shallow. There was no, we weren't going deep into the connection, and we were just so shallow, and just like, I didn't care, and I was just expecting people to betray me anyway, so it was just a matter of time before they would just fuck something up, you know. So I would just stay away from people. So, but with animals, with dogs, you know, you meet a dog in the street, like you walk in the park and someone walks past you with a dog, and you're just like, hey, a dog, and the dog loves you like right away, and it's just like, oh, I made a new friend today. It's so easy with animals. So yeah,
Jay,
I hope this answers your question, René.
one thing that struck me about your story, and I want to be sensitive here, if you don't want to go in that direction, please allow yourself not to. But your story starts when you're 8 years old.
Yeah.
And with the new man coming to the, you know, your family life. But we don't talk about your father, and that to me is quite crucial, because a child who doesn't have his own father, who meets then the violence of another man. By the way, I like to mention that violence is usually much more statistically probable in step parents situations. Yeah.
Really?
So immediately as a family gets divorced and a new person comes in that is not biologically related to that child, the degree of violence and the probability of violence increases substantially. But of course, to me, the fact that you're not speaking about your father means you're already a vulnerable child emotionally, and that this person is probably sensing that and taking advantage of that. Do you think there is Any comment that you would like to make in those respects?
Yeah, I skipped the first 8 years because I time constraints and everything. But if you bring it up, uh, I, I came to this world without a father, and some people say, "Oh, you don't know your dad." I'm like, no, I don't have a dad. I've never had a dad when I was young, which was a weird challenge because for me, I was just like, well, that's how I am, like that's I have my mom. I'm happy with my mom, and then people start making a fuss about it, and it's the other people making a fuss about you not having a dad. It's just like, oh, that's not normal. Okay, interesting. I didn't think it wasn't normal. I didn't think it was a problem until you told me it was a problem. Um,
You mean
so yeah, I grew up.
through small peers at elementary school or kindergarten?
Yeah, and like teachers asking everyone like, "Oh, what does your mom do and what does your dad do?" And I'm like, "I don't have a dad." And I'm like, "Oh, shut up! Everyone has a dad." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't." Sorry to disappoint. And the sad thing about that is that men, a lot of men took advantage of that, and I remember at least 3 men others than John. So at least 3 times where the guy and John did the exact same thing, but it just went out of proportion after that with the violence. Uh, so what the men would do, they would because my mom was a really, really, really beautiful woman. Like physically, she was really attractive.
Just like you, Jay.
Oh, thank you. And um, she so men would try to seduce her, and in order to seduce her, they will seduce me. So they will go through me. They would shower me with gifts. They will be there for me. They will be like I was a prince. Like while they were seducing my mom, I was a prince for them, and I was so special. And anything I wanted, I could get it. Like anything.
You were
And
instrumental to their target, basically.
yeah, and the last man, I was like 12, and 12 years old. I was like, I know the game now, and I was just taking everything I could take out of it. But when I was really younger, I didn't know. I was just like, oh wow, that man is so nice, and he's bringing me gifts, and he gives me attention, and he's there for me, and he's showing me stuff, and he was acting like a dad, and I was like, oh, maybe he's gonna be my dad. And then my mom would see that and be like, oh well, my son likes this guy, so maybe it's gonna work out. And that's what the guy wanted. And he has sex with my mom. And then suddenly, the moment he has sex with my mom, I don't exist anymore. Suddenly, I'm a burden, and he wants me out of the picture because I don't know. I guess I'm taking attention away from him, like I'm taking my mom's attention away from him because I'm her child. So that was also really, really, really hurtful because every time I was like, oh, I hope I hope this guy's gonna be my dad. And that was my one big vulnerability I had. And yeah, a lot of men just use that just to get in bed with my mom.
I want to remind for those that are viewing this YouTube live that you can ask questions in the chat, and we'll be taking those in consideration a bit later on. Jay, so you are going through, before the age of 8, several relationships of abandonment, in a sense, or being objectified at some level. You are meeting men who give you a lot of attention and learning that a father is someone that gives you that kind of attention, but also learning that then once they got what they want, they just run away with the prize and leave you behind, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And by the time you meet Johnny, how do you think your psyche has been changed from being just a child of a mother who loved you? Where do you think you enjoyed quite a bit of safety just in the sphere of your mother? And then, you know, how are you primed for Johnny to take such advantage of the situation?
Well, I, I guess it took me a long time to learn the pattern that men would be using. And with John, the same thing happened. Like, he was so nice. He found out really fast what I liked, and he would like bring me gifts and everything, and like, you know, just shower me with gifts. And I think the word right now is love bombing. Like, just give me so much love all the time, and until it went south, you know.
Do you think you looked for that attachment to a male figure? Do you remember yourself at all longing for
Yeah, for
a man?
for a long time, I thought I was gay because I was kind of geared towards older men. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm gay. And if I would have been gay, that would have not been a problem. No, it's not like, oh no, I don't want to. If I was gay, I was, oh, I'm gay, and I'm not. I'm not gay, and it was like very very weird because I was kind of having feelings toward older men until I realized, oh, I'm just like, I'm just looking for that. I'm still looking for this father figure in my life. So the moment I realized that, I was just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna accept the fact that I'm not never gonna have a father figure in my life, and I will learn to provide myself with my own fatherly love and attention, I guess.
Mm. So up until a certain time of your life, your image of a father is really a narcissistic image, I imagine. Um, the image of a father that just sort of sucks energy out of you as long as you're instrumental to their goals, and then throws you in the trash, sort of thing, once they've got the prize that they want. Or some form of objectification in that sense. To what degree do you think you still carry this image of a man, and how does it change your life in the present, and how do you deal with that?
Uh, I don't really carry this image anymore for two reasons. First of all, I quit drinking and doing drugs, and that brought me a much clearer mind. So now I'm able to I don't know how to say this in English, like, you know, to figure out that, okay, this is me and this is the rest of the world, and because I had experience with some bad people doesn't mean that everyone is bad, you know. It's not because a couple of men uh, were abusive in many ways with me that all men would have been like that. And I can tell you of other men that didn't do that in any ways and were good examples for me uh, in the end. So there's that. And so, yeah,
So
there's a clarity and the
stop
ability
there.
to fit to.
Let me
Yes, go
stop you
ahead.
there for a moment, because so what you're saying here is that becoming sober, and in a way, you know, there are so many ways in which we can become addicted to our coping mechanism, because all you were trying to do was to numb the pain, or right, you were trying to regulate, emotionally regulate,
Yeah.
and you were doing that by consuming drugs. But the moment you decide to be fully sober, the the hell that you lived through also becomes secondary in your life. Not just the coping mechanism, but with it also the trauma becomes something that you can look at and that is not fully defining of who you are, right? I'm not the trauma. The trauma is something that happened to me, and that
Yeah.
now that I can relate and decide upon. I just want to stop
Yeah.
you there. That soberness was very important in the equation of you moving on, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. And because it kind of lifted a fog in my mind. Like my mind was foggy, and it was just the same things, just swirling around in my mind. Always the same things. And getting sober, that kind of stopped this. And going to therapy, it's just not getting sober, because you can get sober and not deal with any of your problems. And if you do that, there are a lot of chances you're gonna like fall back into drugs and alcohol. So being sober was one step, and the other step was going to therapy and take all these things that were swirling in my mind, even though they stopped, they were still there, and just take them out of there. Just take the trash out of my mind. And that was really intense, because I had a lot of deep rooted emotions of anger and hurt and rage. And uh, so that had to come out. And there's only one way to get those emotions out, is to feel them. And to be able to feel your emotions, you need to be sober, because if you're not sober, you're not really connected to your emotions. So being sober is a big part of it. But then it was to figure out what was going on, feeling the emotions. And now that these things are out, well, that gives me so much more room in my mind to start going into more uh, developed ideas, like the idea that my trauma is part of my story, but it's not part of who I am. Like it defines my life story for sure, for sure, but it doesn't define me anymore. It used to define me, but now it's like it's just part of me. It's my story. It's the past, and now I'm looking towards the future, which I couldn't do it before.
René, have you got some questions for Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. Such a heavy sharing that you're sharing about embracing your story, embracing that this is your life story, but it's not your identity. And it really is a profound revelation within yourself. And I can imagine that even from 2020 to now, and maybe just pick up quickly from when the first question of you and your dog, would you say right now, from 2020 being sober, how has your relationship with people, connecting with people, been since then? Do you see people? Do you see the compassion? Are you open to show the compassion you did for the black dog to people now?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, my my way to relate to people switch. It really switched in the last year, because I had the opportunity. Like I went on a big road trip by myself, living in my car for 9 months. So I had a lot of time to myself, and I figured out that would be the great time, a very great time to jump into abandonment issues, like emotional neglect and everything, because these issues, they stem from childhood, and these are really deep rooted issues. And um, you know they 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 feed they feed the illusion that our coping mechanisms are our identity. So by diving into abandonment issues, I knew that I would have to challenge a lot of ideas, deep rooted ideas about myself and who I think I am and who I think I am to others and how I interact. And it will require to destroy a lot of things. And that requires space and it requires time and a lot of will, because it is intense. So I went through that process and I came back from my trip, and people who know me, been knowing me for a while, they were looking at me and they're like, something changed, and they cannot tell, but they're just like they feel something change. And the one thing that changed is that because of everything I've been through in my life, uh, I I figured out, and I could only see it once I got out of the situation, you know. But for all my life, I was not connecting to people. Like if there was someone in front of me, I will always keep like a psychological distance. Sometimes it was almost nothing. But I always had this distance that I can always protect myself. Like if the person turns out to be a bad person, oh, I don't care. I didn't really care about that person. So I'm not hurt, you know. Uh, if they betray me, oh, I knew it was going to happen. I was smart. I was keeping my distances because I knew they would betray me. So all these thinkings, it made it so I was never really truly connected to people in front of me. Never. Because even if I kept this tiniest distance, like the most smallest distance you can think of, I was not connected because there was a distance, and people will feel this distance, and they will be like, "Oh, there's something off with that guy." I cannot say exactly what's going on, but there's something off with that guy, and then they just get away because that's the same thing to do, and that would just feed my loneliness and everything. So, and by dealing with all my like emotional issues, I was able to remove that distance, and I came back able to really deeply connect with people without fear, because I found the strength in myself to um, give myself, procure myself with all the emotional support that I need. Like, well, maybe not all of it, but like the basics, I can provide myself with them. You know, I can take care of myself, and I am not depending on others. If somebody can bring something in my life, I will be really, really happy. And I'm really happy to have my friends now that I can talk about my life and share my things, or just uh, goof around and just have make a meal together, like have dinner together, and just give ourselves big hugs because we're feeling like giving ourselves hugs. And I can just really enjoy those moments. But now with all my experience, I'm aware also that, you know, it might end. And that's okay because that's part of life. We have to accept that. So it might end. And my friends, they have their lives and they're not going to be there all the time for me. So I have to provide myself with my comfort. And um, so what I think is that, yes, about like your question about like having as much compassion as I have now with people as I had with my dog. Yeah, I found my compassion back, and I can really, and actually I feel blessed because with what I've been through, people can come to me and tell me about what they've been through in their lives, and I'm not gonna judge them, and I'm not gonna judge them because of the way they reacted, because I think that's the shame. And I'm just figuring this out right now. So big insight moment, everybody. Can we have a light bulb on screen or something? So because I was trying to figure out like the shame and trauma. Where does the shame comes from? And because it's the shame that prevents us to speak, to tell our stories, to say, I have had trauma, I've been traumatized, I've been hurt, and there's shame. And the reason I think we have this shame, it's not because of the trauma, but because the way we reacted to the trauma. And I think a lot of people will be ashamed to say they didn't fight back. I have, well, pretty much all the women I have around me in my life at one point or another and at different levels, they've been sexually attacked. They've been through sexual violences. And I think like they have the shame that, oh, it's not that I've been, someone did these things to me. It's that I didn't fight back. I then reacted. I let him do his thing. There's all the shame comes from how we reacted to that. So all that to say that now when people come to me and tell me their story and how they reacted, they feel that there's no judgment because I'm like, yeah, I feel why you did that, and we can have those really deep and real conversations, and that is a lot much more compassion that I could have had in the past. And as for my dog, that was giving me like all the comfort and everything, like the easy emotional support I needed. I think this dog is just inside me right now, and I'm my own black dog. That's my conclusion right now. I just grew up to be my own black dog that I love, even though I'm absolutely not perfect. And people are gonna say I look good on the outside, but sometimes in the inside, I can be kind of ugly and like the ugly dog or something. But that's okay. I just love myself for who I am now, just like my dog used to love me for who I was. So yeah, I'm my own dog now.
We're coming to the end of the program.
Yeah.
Before moving to the last section where you're going to tell us a little bit more about your professional life and how we can get in contact with you. I wanted to honor a couple of things in your story that I want to mirror, as well as sort of share with the public, because these are not very well known notions. One is the fact that we can have memories that are not visual, but that are physically imprinted in us. I went through that realization myself when, by a chance, actually a gay person who I used to work with happened to hug me in a way that put my ear next to his heart, and I happened to listen to his heart like tum 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 tum. And we had been talking about the loss of my mother, who killed herself when I was 2. And in that moment, I realized, oh wait, I don't have a visual memory of my mother, but I have a physiological memory of my mother. I know her heartbeat. I felt her heartbeat, the whole time that she was there. I was literally an embedded part of her for all that time. My neurology was formed in her body, right? And so this also honors the fact that in your story of abandonment, there is a story of fatherhood, because the father that should have been there, went away, and through perhaps the stress of your mother or just how vulnerable your mother felt, you also absorbed that sort of lack of support. So that's one thing, is that memories can reveal themselves in non-visual ways. Until very recently, a lot of people would disregard sensations other than visual sensations, and that's really wrong.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I see, that we have been talking about connection in general, And coming back to the dog, and this moment when you hug the dog, and that's such a pivotal moment in your life, because that is a secure connection that you have. There is unconditional love, but it's also a secure connection. And to this day, it seems to me that the learning that you got out of that secure connection, it's something that you can just as equally apply to the world of relationship that you have today, as you could apply the world of violence that you have also learned. In other words, both of them at some level stand in relation to your learning of what relationships are. And this is so important to point out, because often I do deal with a lot of clients who have attachment issues, and I tell them, for example, in my case, one of the things that really saved me was to become attached with a friend, an Australian friend who has been such a secure source of affection. And we have our differences, and I've gone away from him and not spoken to him for several years sometimes, but the love has always been there, and so that security has always been there, and that is the model that I take in everything else. In fact, coming back to being a therapist, actually, and finding my role in life at a professional level is an outcome of the security that I experienced with a friend. So the message here is, for anybody who is suffering from attachment disorders, that we just need to find out where you are attached, or where you can be attached at any level, and then work on that for you to then emerge out of all the other issues. So
Yeah.
do you want to say something, Jay, on this level?
Yeah. I just want to recognize that when you have abandonment issues, it is something that is really, really, really hard to get like help, or like a healing relation, because to have healing, to heal your emotional connection issues, you have to connect with someone, but your issues prevent you to connect with that someone. So it's really a catch-22, and you have to find the will, really the strength of mind to say, okay, I'm gonna trust that person, and I think this person, like, I'm gonna give this person the most generous intentions right now, and accept that that person might help me, and just make a huge leap of faith. And you have to do it, and don't do it with everyone you meet, because it's just going to worsen things. But when you find a person that you think, okay, that could work out, you won't know until you do it. So you just have to take that leap. And hopefully it's going to work out. I wish it's going to work out.
Okay, wonderful. So, JayMan, you became a comedian, and that's how I actually met you, because my psychology thesis was trauma and comedy, the relationship between trauma and comedy. So we just want to find out a little bit about where you play, and just a little bit about your professional life. And also, you have a book. You came up with a book. You're a published author now.
I am. I'm a real author now. So yeah, I'm a stand-up comedian. I've been doing it for the last 10 years. And I started like in the last, since not even a year, I started really talking about the stuff I want to talk about. And not, and I stopped trying to figure out like, oh, what do people want to talk about, and write jokes about that, because that doesn't work for me. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to talk about like, oh, my mental issues. And I started talking about those on stage, and it really worked. It really worked. And I feel people are listening when I talk about like mental stuff. They are, because no one's doing it. So it comes from a real place. So people feel that, I think. So actually, right now, I'm playing in Quebec. I've been doing comedy in French mostly. I've done some in English. It's working pretty well in English. So yeah, when I'm doing shows in French in Quebec, I really would like to like go around Europe and visit Europe and make shows. So maybe you live in a country and you're like, I'd like to have like a stand-up comedian come in my place. We can make that work, no problem. So there's that, and I'm working right now on my next show, my next one-man show, who's called Patrick's Funerals. Well, that would be the title in English. In French is Les Funérailles de Patrick, and it's a show about suicide. So I decided to like tackle an easy subject for a first real show about mental health and talk about suicide. So I have that coming out, and like the first shows I did, a couple of shows in front of really restricted audiences to try the jokes, the text, and everything, and it's working really well. It's going to be a pretty good show. So that could be brought to Europe. Who knows? Like,
You
suicide
really
is like,
Europe, man. We wish you.
yeah. Well, suicide worldwide is
Yeah,
the
true.
second cause of death for people between 15 and 35 years old, something like that. So it's a huge issue. Everybody needs to hear about that. So, and I also have my book Johnny right here.
who we have come to know now. We know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
the book is in French. Is it in French, Quebecian French? Because that's even less accessible, or is it French?
It is partly in Quebecer.
Uh-huh.
French Canadian, they say. But most of it, like it's in the so it's in three languages. Like the narration is in French, like universal French. Then there's the main
dialogue,
character. Yeah, well, the main character speaks in Quebecer because that's me, basically, and the bad guy speaks only in English because he's an American who never learned French. So,
And so there are three
there's
languages
that.
in this book.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Amazing.
I just figured that out.
So you have to be very, very educated in a way, yeah, to be able to get through this. Wonderful that that region of the world has such linguistic skills.
Yeah.
Are you planning to write the English version, and would some of the jokes be lost to just the plain one language translation?
If someone wants to tackle translating that book, let me know. We're
Good
gonna
luck.
discuss it. But good luck, because the writing style is really unique. Because okay, quick story how I
Yes,
came
please.
to have this book. When I finished therapy and my mind was getting better and my life was getting better, I got at the point where I needed to take that story out for good. Just like take the all that was left out. And I started writing, and I said I'm going to write a book about it. And my first try was to write something. Yeah, that's me. Just the day I got my book, like the physical book. That was quite a day. So I started writing a first book, and I wanted to write it like a real writer and being like dramatic and everything. And it didn't work out. It was so boring. I was boring myself to death trying to write that book. So I said, screw that. No one's going to read it anyway, so I'm going to write it for myself. And I just started writing in such an absurd way. It's really absurd. It makes no sense. Like the jokes are really weird, and most of the jokes are in the narration. So like the characters, the story between the two characters is really, really dramatic and intense. And you have this person just telling this story like it's something really lighthearted and making jokes and going like
So you have a narrator, with being
Yeah,
lighthearted about a story, but the characters of the story are very dramatically interacting with one another. Okay. And,
exactly. And
and
the timeline is super convoluted because you're in the present and it always switches from like the present of the story and the past of the character. So you're just jumping from one place to another, and I'm playing with that, with those convoluted timelines, and I just
right.
had a lot of fun with that. And people seem to like it a lot. So I've been told.
Wonderful. And Jay, the two characters on the front cover here, it actually touches me because I made a YouTube video called "Your Trauma Is Not Yours," where I also used a band-aid on the mouth of certain of the characters in the thumbnail to indicate the secrecy of trauma, the fact that trauma always has secrecy. In fact, in that video, I argue that you cannot maintain a state of trauma if you reveal it, if you share it. Trauma and
Mm,
secrecy go hand in hand. That was the argument. And
absolutely.
then what your secret about is this shadow side of your story, right? Is that what the image there is implicating or implying?
It is. It is. And I had nothing to do with the image. It's the editor who got someone to draw the cover. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, that person understands like the
Wow,
story and what trauma
wonderful.
is. Because yeah, there's this little kid, like this little innocent kid that you know nothing about, and he's just with band-aids on his mouth so he cannot talk. And there's his shadow, like his dark part of himself that is just eating him. Like he's just like his shadows are devouring himself. And that is what living with trauma is. Until you're able to speak it out and you just shine lights on your shadows, and suddenly, yeah, they're not that bad.
Yeah. Jay, if somebody wanted to get in contact with you for a show or to continue to talk about trauma on their shows, how would they do that?
You can go, the easiest way is on my website. So you go at JayMan, which is JayMan.lol. So JayMan.lol. And you're going to get all my contact information, and just send me a message and we'll discuss. You know,
Yeah,
about doing a show in Europe about suicide. Who knows?
that would be really great. Indeed, suicide is such an important topic.
It
Okay, well,
is.
I want to personally thank you for having shared as far as you could share within this short time. This beautiful story. Thank you, René, for asking these beautiful questions. I think you really hit on the mark there about the dog, such an important element. And we will be back here on Saturday for 20 minutes live again. You can always buy us a coffee to contribute to the show by scanning that QR code there. And JayMan, you will continue to be part of our journey in talking all about trauma as we move on. Perhaps you'll come back as well to share some other sort of facets of your story, to talk about suicide perhaps and the show and some of the details. But be rest assured that many of the things you have shared with us will have informed our journey here and our mission to understand trauma, actually. So, yeah, one last word you guys want to have before we knock off?
Well,
Sure, maybe.
I'll go ahead, Renee. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much.
No, you go ahead.
Sorry.
You go
Come on,
ahead.
Jay, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Renee.
Oh,
Please do go ahead.
this is lovely. So I really like how you came and just shared your story and shared anecdotes, and were able to really visualize the story, especially when you're talking about the bomb and the password, that you only have one chance. And you know, when I'm with Nicholas and he tells me I usually have these great visualizations, you just took it on another level. And I really got to appreciate it. I really got to get into that visual, and I felt part of you, you know. It's really like a movie where when you get home and you're trying to get in the right key and it's still ticking. If time is up. It's all over. So I really appreciate for you coming and just sharing your heart with us in that way, in your authentic way, in a way that we really were able to relate. I was, and looking forward to the next time when you come home and also share more about your story, whether you'll be in Quebec or whether you'll be in Europe. So buy us a
Who
coffee.
knows?
We'll support JayMan's show in Europe.
Right.
Okay, JayMan,
Well,
last
yeah, I'm glad you appreciate it, and I'm really thankful that you're doing this, that you're talking like openly about trauma, because we have to talk about it, because that's the best way to put an end to it. And so we have to be honest in those discussions. And thank you very much for having me and giving me a chance to get my story out there. And I hope I was just able to touch some lives with sharing the story, and maybe giving like hope, just giving a glimmer of hope in some people's dark days, to say, oh, maybe I can find like peace of mind again, and find my happiness again. So thank you.
Okay, I want to thank the viewers, 2 loyal viewers that have been following the whole program. Thank you very much. We cannot see you, but thanks a lot for coming to the show, and see you on Saturday. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.